All right, thank you everybody for joining us for our seminar today. I'm very excited to introduce both of our speakers, Charles Midega and Jesus Orozco. Jesus is going to talk first and then Charles, but let me introduce them both briefly before we get started. So Charles Midega is Executive Director of Poverty and Health Integrated Solutions in Kenya. Formerly a senior scientist at ICIPE and one of the pioneers of the push-pull system, probably familiar to many of you. Charles is now involved in many projects with the Rebecca Nelson Lab and others at Cornell focused on the concept of circular economy, circularity. Professor Orozco is a professor at Zamorano University in Honduras. Of entomology, as his PhD from University of Nebraska in entomology. It runs what is the largest insect collection in Honduras and the second largest in Central America. And a black soldier fly colony at his university where Charles and I have spent the last week with him. Very impressive. And I hope you'll listen closely to what he has to say because what both of these guys have done is amazing. So they're here today and this week supported by a community moonshot grant from the CAL's Office of Research and Innovation. So thanks to them for supporting collaboration between PHIS and Maseno University in Kenya, Zamorano University, and Cornell. Corey Leonard is the PI on that investigation here. So thanks to the CAL's Office of Research and supporting this. And I'll turn it over to Professor Orozco to get started. Thank you.
I don't think you can hear it because you're behind the speakers, but it is cutting, the audio is cutting in and out and buzzing, and the people on Zoom definitely cannot hear if it's not amplified, and it's kind of hard to hear and hear when it's not amplified. Try that other microphone.
Can you hear me better? Or okay. Thank you, Eli, for the introduction. Very generous. And thank you for coming. I hope you find this talk interesting. My name is Jesus Orozco. Eli pronounces my last name even better than me. Orozco. I'm an entomologist at Zamorano University. And I've been there for 9 years. And most of my research is related to biodiversity of agricultural systems. So, but about 6 years ago, a student came with the idea of something he saw on Facebook related to the black soldier fly. And I said, why not? Let's give it a try. And this project's been growing and growing and growing. And it's giving me so many opportunities to share what I've learned through that process. This is the second time I visit Cornell. This is the second time I'm giving this perspective seminar. So thank you again for inviting me. For those that don't know what Zamorano is, Zamorano is a boarding school in Honduras. There's around 1,200 students living on campus from a lot of Central American and Latin American countries. And every once in a while, we get some Europeans and some American students also going there. The place where the institution is very large and is composed of course, the classrooms and the residences, but also there's places where there's production of crops and there are plants. So Zamorano produces milk, produces yogurt, produces cheese, and the students get involved in all these activities. But the big part of Zamorano is production of produce. So there's lettuce, there's yucca, there's papaya, there's lemon, there's a bunch of stuff. And because of that, and related to being a boarding school, there's a lot of waste. So when we started doing different trials on waste to see what was the best ways to feed the black soldier fly. But that's not what I'm gonna talk about today. I hear the buzzing now. Do you hear it? It's all right? It's good? Okay, it's the light, okay. So this talk is only about black soldier fly for animal feed, right? The black soldier fly scientific name is Hermetia illucens, right? And it's a fly of the family Stratiomiidae. They're called soldier flies, the whole group soldier flies, because the antenna looks like a lancet from one of the older soldiers, right? And it's a black fly, right? So it's the black soldier fly. I don't translate the name into Spanish because it doesn't make any sense, right? But in Spanish, the name we like to use is mosca guarera, which means a fly that is attracted to fermented alcohol, right? Which is much cooler. And it's because in the beginning, or when the fly got attention in Central America, was the biggest populations were in fermented banana, in banana plantations, right? So the fly is got a complete cycle, meaning it's got a pupa, right? Somewhere here, right? Like just like the butterflies and like the beetles. So it goes through an egg, then there's a larva that is called a maggot, there's a pupa, and there are the adults. Producing protein or doing insects for animal of feed, there's nothing rare about it, there's nothing new. But there are many advantages with these species. And one of the advantages is the adults, they don't feed on anything. They don't need a special diet. So you can keep these guys separate in a different place, just reproducing, producing eggs without the need of feeding anything. And the larvae are very voracious and they will eat anything that is organic, right? So there's a lot of waste in Zamorano. There's pig manure, chicken manure, right? Urine. There's a lot of urine also. But this is the stuff we ended up doing the most because it's easier to work with and the caloric content is very high, right? And that's dining hall waste. From the 1,200 students we have in the dining hall, about 150 kilograms are wasted per day. So this is food they left on the plates, right? And that comes to me every day at 6 a.m. From that organic waste, right? So daily, around 150 kilograms, about 4 tons a month, we produce an organic fertilizer, which is frass, which is insect poop, right? But I'm not going to talk about that today. And there's a portion of fresh larva, means living larva. And there's the migratory, meaning the black ones that will become adults later to keep the colony, right? And this is the meal, which is fresh larvae that have gone through a process of drying and grinding and can be used to mix with other stuff to feed animals. That in the case you want, this is for the case when you want to have a formulated diet, right? We love using this, or I love using this, and this is where I think the direction of the project will go, because you can feed this directly to free-range chickens. This is expensive to produce in the sense there's a lot of work involved. You have to dry them, you have to grind them, and more energy goes into the process. And thinking about using something like waste, you want to spend the least amount of energy into the end product, right? So, but we have done a lot of experiments with this, especially because all the professors involved into raising poultry and pigs and tilapia, they want to have, their formulated diet. So we did all this, and that's what I'm gonna show you today. And of course, we have an overproduction of eggs, which for people thinking about making money out of the black soldier fly, it might be a venue because everybody wants to start a colony, but it's very hard to begin with small batch of eggs. So we can sell eggs if somebody needs, but we're giving away mostly. Okay. So this is the process for the production of the meal. Remember, this is what I'm gonna end up doing After 6 years, I learned my lesson. This is too expensive, too time consuming. So we're gonna go free range. But what we did for the last 6 years was this. So we froze the larvae, right? And we put it in a solar dryer until they dried. And then we grind them in one of these homemade KitchenAid expensive things. And we ended up with a meal. Very expensive, and they break because the larva's got a lot of fat. Okay. That's the solar dryer, and this is the dry larva, and this is the KitchenAid expensive thing that doesn't work very well. And this is the meal at the end, right? And the ideal for this portion of the drying is larvae that are 21 days old. Okay. The meal is very rich nutritionally. It's got a high nutritional value, about 41% protein. Sometimes it's 37. It varies, right? Depending on what the students didn't like in the plate that week, right? They hate chicken for some reason. They think the chicken is not good, right? They think the chicken in the dining hall is not good. And it's very fatty also. And I don't have that table, but the people raising tilapia is very interested in this portion. You know, the type of fats, the lipids, the lauric acid is very important or very abundant in there. And because we are feeding animals with waste, this is what everybody wants to know. Will I get my animals sick? The answer is no. We've done many tests. This is just one of the latest ones we did, right? Everything falls within the acceptable range for this, for each one of these factors, right? E. coli, less than 1, and all this, you know, but that's safe. We've even fabricated at some point a sausage for human consumption. They taste very nice. At least that's what they tell me. I never tried them, right? And as I said, I'm not going to talk about this, but this is the frass. This is the good frass, Charles. Oh, you saw it, right? So that's the good frass. So people show frass that it's not frass, and this is a great fertilizer. So some of the animals we've done experiments with, very hard to do experiments with these too, because large quantities of meals are needed to do replicates and do a lot of treatments and stuff. So this is the direction of the project. So I'm just going to present to you some of the results we found with some of these animals. For example, for egg-laying chicken. So what we do is do different percentages of replacement in the diet. So it's not like we're adding Hermetia meal to the diets. We're actually replacing the amount of protein and the amount of fat, because we know the composition of the meal. So we take out whatever Hermetia is given, right? So we have isoproteic and isoenergetic diets. And, sorry, laying performance, and this for laying chicken, is not affected, right? So you can go as high as 20%, and you keep on having the same amount of eggs. Food consumption actually goes down, that's important. The eggs become heavier, and that's something that is very interesting. So you end up with bigger eggs when you feed them Hermetia meal. And the food conversion ratio is also better. It means they need less food to transform to build more tissue, right? So less food, and you still get the same amount of product at the end. Egg quality, this is one of the greatest results, right? The weight of the egg, as I said, this is the control, this is the normal diet that they receive. As you see, with 10%, it's almost 3 grams more, 2 grams, 2 grams. So that was a great result, and you're saving money because you don't have to feed them the normal feed. But this thing we're making from waste. The person in charge, the professor in charge of this was very excited. We haven't still put the time into publishing it, but there's some results in the literature, but they vary a little bit. And this has been a constant. We have repeated this experiment many times, and we keep on getting the same results. And this is also something that he was very interested in evaluating, because chicken production, if you go to these places, they have a heavy smell, a very ammonia. So the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus decreases as you increase the Hermetia meal in their diet. And that's something also that was very, very nice. Also, the humidity in the feces goes up, which makes it easier also to then use for compost or other things, right? Okay, I gotta go faster. This is something also that is in the process of publication, and it's the same question as I said that everybody's asking: will I get my animals sick if I feed in the stuff you're feeding with waste? And the answer is no. Actually, this is the immunoglobulins, and this is all part of the blood of the animal, and it actually gets better. And that also is in the literature and is known. We did a couple of experiments with pigs. Good results. So we did one with lactating sows, and Hermetia doesn't do anything bad to them, just a 4% replacement, because it's a lot of meal that is necessary to feed these animals. But it was nice to try it. And also, we did one with piglets. For this one, piglets eat little. So we have 140 Yorkshire pigs, and we distributed in some nice treatments, and we did it with pigs that were 7 days old, and we ran the experiment for 45 days. So at the end, they were 105 days, and as you can see, they gain more weight when they're fed Hermetia meal. Keep in mind, I'm an academic. I'm not trying to sell you the Hermetia meal, right? So I have no reason to show something that is not real, and we have repeated this, and it's good. It's good science. And this is also to show the feed conversion ratio, which remember it means how much muscle they end up producing based on what they intake. And as it goes lower, is better. It means you need less food to produce the same pounds of meat. And again, as you increase the amount of meal in the diet, the feed conversion ratio goes down. Okay, and lastly, because you want to listen to Charles, we've done many experiments with tilapia also. They have the people working with fish have different types of questions, especially related to what happens to the water. I'm not going to present that to you, but it's good. I mean, it doesn't contaminate the water. It doesn't make it any more difficult. We've done experiments also trying to have an aquaponic system with this wastewater. It's more or less good or bad. It's not so good, to tell you the truth. Yeah. And again, same thing. I mean, depending on the animal, we define these percentages of replacement. So for tilapia, we've done a lot of those. And also very good. I mean, it's the same pattern. It doesn't affect the growth. It doesn't make the animal sick. Actually, on the contrary, sometimes you end up with more daily gain, which is the case, for example, here with tilapia. And also the final weight is better when you feed it with tilapia meal. And for this experiment, which is one of the latest we did, we had to use 360 fish of about 15 grams. Charles, I'm ready for you. Okay, thank you.
Have to take the microphone, Charles. I have. Oh, you have one, okay. How do I stop it? Is it working for everybody? No, it's not working for Lori. Please, it doesn't work. You have to hold it quite close to the.
Can you hear me? So I'm using this for the sake of those who are participating remotely. Otherwise, I'm loud enough. Again, my name is Charles Midega. As Eli generously introduced me, I run an organization that seeks to address determinants of health, improve health by addressing determinants of health. In addition to that, I teach implementation science at Maseno University and do a lot of other things on the side. As Jesus, in Africa, would call him Jesus, has eloquently described the BSF operation in Honduras. I thought it doesn't make sense for me to repeat more or less similar things because we do similar things in Western Kenya. And so I'll go into more of, with this beautiful science and these nice results, how do we push this towards achieving impact at scale? Because that's what I teach. I teach implementation science. How do you translate research results to achieve impact at scale? So how do we scale up this operation? Now, one thing that we need to understand at this point is that BSF industry is context specific. Jesus has presented on the animal feed side of things. In our context, BSF is important for addressing, number one, waste management. If you work in Africa where you deal with informal settlements, one of the challenges is waste. And most of the waste that we produce is organic. In Kisumu, on a daily basis, when the season is not very good, we produce about 200 tons of waste, about 80% of which is organic. And that is what BSF thrives on. And another thing we do very well is that our population is growing very fast, and that's a good thing. So it means we need to address our food production in a manner that is sustainable. And another thing that is not working for us very well is our soil health is degraded. We keep mining nutrients out of the soil without much going back in. And that's why the elements of security are important for us. How do we extract the beneficial nutrients in what we consider waste back into the production systems? And of course, if the soil health is not very good, you have such problems of mycotoxin contamination and the rest that Rebecca would explain better. Now, as I mentioned, for us, one, we want to address the problem of waste. So waste management becomes a priority. And because Jesus has described what is happening in Honduras, the results that were presented here would have had to do with use of the frass to produce crops. And we've tested that frass on vegetables, for example, and the yields are very good. We've also tested that on both free-range chicken and broilers, and again, results very good. So given the fact that we have these multiple pathways, or in terms of products, from the frass, you can actually constitute very good soil organic amendment. This can be packaged for market, or can directly be applied in your vegetable farm or in your crop production system. So this is a product line that's available to you. Animal feed, including poultry feed, that becomes a product line for you. Or you can also get other products, because BSF, you can extract so many other products from it. Now, how do you, with this science, how do you then translate this to achieve some impact? There are two scaling approaches that's feasibly possible here. One is the commercial-driven scaling operation that would often be standardized, would be centralized, but would also have a franchise model. If you see what McDonald's have done, if you're a fan of Big Mac, you know what I mean. There's a franchise model, you find it everywhere. But often the commercial enterprise-driven one is often centralized and standardized. But given the stage of BSF industry R&D, the second approach seems to be an immediate availability for us. Decentralized, context-specific, and requires very little infrastructure. Now, whether you're going for number one or number two, there are certain frontiers that are important that we must take into consideration. One is the technical frontier. That would define the skill sets required, would define the infrastructure. What do you need really to be able to drive that? There are also the regulatory or policy legal issues that we must contend with as we think of scaling this up. Sociocultural issues. I mean, insect is just a yuck thing for a lot of people. It is not only in Africa. You can talk about this in London, or in New York, or in Tokyo, Japan, Nairobi. It's yuck, you know? And the cultural things around insect. A lot of communities in Africa actually eat insects. In that context, it's not as difficult as talking about this in Ohio, for example. And then the operational issues. How do you contextualize your system to improve productivity as well as efficiency? Because eventually you need to make money. So these are the issues you have to contend with as you think of translating these beautiful results for impact to scale. So regulatory issues are a challenge in every context you want to speak. We know that people have extracted protein from different sources, but the elements that still require, this is a protein source from an insect. If you remember the mad cow disease, one of the hypothesized reasons for its being there is that the intraspecific feeding of a protein from a different, intraspecific feeding of a protein to a cow might have led to a normal protein becoming pathogenic and interfering with the nervous system of an animal. So the elements that need to be addressed. In a lot of contexts, we don't have global standards, so to speak, guidelines that would drive commercialization. But then we also have an issue of those who generate evidence, the researchers. How do you influence policy? Because we need evidence to be able to guide standards and regulations. So this is an area that needs to be addressed to be able to advance scaling, whether you're talking about small scale scaling or commercialized scaling. Raw materials is a factor. If you get a chance to go to Zamorano University, it's a beautiful place. Those insects are fed better than I feed myself. The food they eat is beautiful. If you're going to operate a decentralized small-scale operation and you give them that, you might lose your insects because other people might eat that food instead. So the idea is you need to understand, because for you to run this operation, you need a steady source of the raw materials, whatever waste stream that you're talking about, and it must be in sufficient quantities when you need it. Quality of the material is important because the quality of the insect you end up with in terms of nutritional content depends on what you fed the insect was fed on. So quality is important. So you need to define what is the waste stream you have, what amount of waste do you have, when do you have it in space and time so that you can plan an operation that is suitable. Is it coming in January? Do you have in January? What happens in June? What do you have in June that can replace? It also involves an R&D process that helps you to understand what is the waste stream. If you have options like we have in Kisumu, that gives you better quality insect. But you need to understand the availability of waste, where it is, who has it, and when it is there. Partnerships are important, as I've mentioned. In certain cases, you find people who we are producing insects, somebody else is managing the waste. Can we have partnerships to make this waste available? And when you're not going to have waste, how can you preserve what you have in January to be able to use in August? And we learned recently that by fermenting certain wastes, you can actually stabilize it and keep it for longer, for periods when you don't have access to it. So we need to define this to be able to have a scaling approach. Economics, there are two aspects of economics. One is what would make a business sense. Looking at gross margin analysis, what am I putting in, what am I getting out of it? Simple business analysis. But with BSF, there's the broad economic analysis. The other benefits that you will be able to sell someone who wants to make money out of this. What does it do to public health? When you clean the environment institution in Kisumu, what is the contribution of that? And how does that then help municipal councils that are supposed to run those kind of affairs? It gives an opportunity for people to be able to employ one or two people. The broader benefits, environmental benefits, economic benefits, and social benefits to soil health, saving Lake Victoria, because now you have waste diverted from going into the lake back into the land. Those other benefits come into play. But if you want to run a sustainable operation, then you need sustainable businesses. How do you sort out these two? Because eventually it must make sense to someone. At the same time, the prices of whatever you develop must be competitive. You're going to sell it in the market. I can easily produce poultry feed, for example, but also produce organic manure. I'm going to sell this individually in the market. So if the products are slightly more expensive than what is in there in the market already, then there's a challenge there. So whatever we do, we must make sure that if you're going to put anything in the market, it must make economic sense competitively. So these are issues that we need to address. But eventually, if you want to make money, you do two things: reduce your costs of production and make your system more efficient, so that you eventually increase your profits. This is important, especially if you're looking at a commercially driven scaling. At the small scale level, where you have a household producing BSF in their backyard in a compost bin and feeding the larva to the chicken, then you don't have to worry much about this. So this becomes critically important if you're targeting a market-driven scaling. And for that, then market and market linkages become important. We talk about BSF and these potential streams as being really, really good. But if you begin to ask, where is the market for the products? And then you encounter challenges, you realize there's not so much market available for these individual products. Part of it is because people are not familiar with even the protein benefit of that you get from BSF. But this is not happening at the ultra local level, because farmers, those who produce chicken, for example, they know that any insect larva is good for the birds. They also know anything that looks like manure is good for the soil. So it's good really to understand at what level are you operating. Are we willing to eat proteins that are derived from insects, maybe by fortified porridge, for example? Are we? You're allowed to be honest. Can you take porridge fortified with BSF protein? Seriously? One of the opportunities to be honest. Anyway, again, there's need to be able to service possible markets that are emerging. We need evidence of safety. But again, we also need to work together, bring research, industry, policy. So as we develop products, we are assured of safety. Safety is number one. Safety, safety, safety. Capacity. We are grappling with this, and I want to say one thing about Rebecca Nelson, if you know her. Thank you. Doing it in a manner that is the simplest possible. Not advanced capacities. How can the smallest scale producer produce without worrying about, I must know the chemistry in it, I must know, keep it simplest possible. But whichever way you look at it, we need capacity to be able to effectively produce. So far, we have limited knowledge on the extent of the beauty of BSF farming, all the totality that comes with it. There are so many opportunities that we need, but we need to build skills. Skills, both technical, how to do it, but again, contextualizing the kind of infrastructure that we need for scaling out. If you're talking about a household producing this in their backyard, what kind of bin do you need for them? And what is the efficiency level you expect out of that bin? If you're talking about a mid-scale level scaling out, what kind of infrastructure do they need to be able to drive this operation? So skills in terms of your knowledge, and skills and capacity in terms of what do you need? What kind of infrastructure do you need to drive this? Place-based research and development, this is a new industry. BSF is a new industry with the potential that you can choose to translate into multi-billion dollars, or can also be something that is nice to do. So the potential depends on your standpoint. So being a new industry, so many questions must be asked. But if you want to scale it, then we must contextualize our questions for the particular elements that you want to drive. I've already given an example. If you're targeting a single household, what kind of bin, what kind of infrastructure, what kind of questions do they have? If you're targeting to have a franchise model, what kind of geospatial analysis do you need to know what waste is where, How much is it? At what time of year? And what kind of how does the BSF larva perform using that waste stream? So basically, trying to understand this question, but asking questions that are relevant to the various contexts in which you operate. Now, facilities is still a big issue, as I've mentioned, but there are elements of sharing facilities, shared facilities. When we establish relationships, as Christina will tell you, can we share facilities? Can we have a shared lab in a given region? Can we share, if we are a community of 10 households, can we share a spot? Can we share a bin? So that we are building our own infrastructure in our context that serves us. So we need really a context-specific R&D framework to drive scaling. So far, what we've done is a lot of trial and error, and Rebecca and I are so good at this. Find out if it works. If it doesn't, drop it. Try another thing. So we learn in that context, and that eventually becomes very expensive. Can we now, given what we have, define our R&D that is going to serve us in our context? I think at that point, I would like to stop so that we can ask questions and discuss. Jesus and I are not experts. We all are experts. And I'm hoping that we can have an open discussion. If you don't like what we talk about, just say it. Thank you very much.
This is it working now or no? Yes. Okay. So thank you, Charles. Thank you, Jesus. We now have 10 minutes for questions and answers. Questions. So if anybody has a question, maybe can you walk around so I can monitor online?
Yeah.
Thank
That
you.
much so.
It's not working.
This should work. Okay. 1, 2. No, that's not working. This one is 1, 2, 1, 2. This one is
1, 2, all right. I was trying to have one for you guys and another one for the audience. So well, let's try. Get your hand up and make your question and introduce yourself. Let's go.
Hello, my name is Jesse Hernandez. I'm a freshman in plant sciences, and I'm trying to minor in entomology. And I guess I have a question is, do you know where black soldier flies are native to, and if they may pose an ecological impact in both Kenya and Honduras?
Should we take another hand? No, any other question? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Charles. You told us about the prerequisites for scaling, and I was hoping to see the scaling framework. How is it taken from pilots to larger scale? Any thought on that? My name is Zainalam.
Excellent. Okay, you guys can handle those two, and we'll get to another round.
So I'll answer your question first. And the black soldier fly is an American species distributed from or around all the tropical areas of this continent, right? It doesn't tolerate cold, but because of the interest or in the last 30 to 40 years, it is considered now widespread. It's cosmopolitan at this point. It's in Australia, it's in Europe, it's in Africa. It doesn't represent any danger. It's just a propagous species. Despite of being generalistic in their feeding, adults cannot reproduce outside their range without special conditions. So even if 1,000 flies are liberated in France in the summer, they will die during the winter. So this is, and the other thing is, compared to the housefly, for example, the black soldier fly doesn't carry any pathogens. The black soldier fly doesn't like humans. So the housefly likes to be inside residences, inside houses. Hermetia avoids humans at all costs. Even if you get inside the love cage, where you keep where we keep the larvae to reproduce, they will avoid, being on top of you. So I hope that answered your questions.
Thank you very much. He's answered the question very well. BSF is originally endemic to the Americas. And the reason why I want to repeat this is because most of the species that have moved, so to speak, from the Americas into the rest of the world have actually been pests. Some of the invasives we have, for example, in Africa, including fall armyworm, actually migrated, so to speak, from the Americas. So this is one of the most, one of the beneficial ones we've received from the Americas. Now, yeah, thank you very much for that question. The reason why I didn't present a scaling framework is in two parts. One, there are still so many unknowns to drive a framework for scaling. Number two, the diversity of the context within which you operate. But I'll give you a few examples. A franchise, so to speak, not the franchise from the commercial enterprise model, but a franchise in quotes from the small scale community-based waste to value chain approach would follow something like this. Identifying where you have your waste sources, creating mini centers in there that then serves to collect, to process, and create products that are linked to a higher entity. For example, you've got people in a certain point, maybe where I am, the neighborhood around me, I collect waste from them, I produce BSF. At a higher level, there is a commercial seed producer, a commercial feed producer that then collects from these points, prepares or converts that to formulates poultry or animal feed, and then now distributes to the market. That's a model. There could also be a model that I talked about briefly, having a household neighborhood model where you have small-scale farmers producing this or household producing in their backyard and using that for their chicken. So that is basically advancing it, but from a household point of view, where you use your own waste or your neighbor's waste. Produce and then serve yourself or serve your neighbor as well with the emerging poultry. And then there's a commercial driven entity. In most cases, the commercial driven entry would be would work in a situation where you have your own waste. It has worked with us in Kenya, where you have Amila Unga Limited, where they produce unga, the maize meal for human consumption. Then there's waste. So they use that waste to produce animal feed. So for a large entity that's centralized, that is standardized, it makes sense if you have your own waste. If you're producing one product, you'll end up with waste. You can actually use BSF to be able to drive that operation and make additional product streams. So there are different frameworks based on the context within which you operate.
Professor Nelson, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to ask a question, if I can. Jesus, you emphasized, or you seem to be emphasizing the use of cafeteria waste as feed, I mean, as my understanding goes, for your colony. And I'm wondering about also kitchen, like before it goes onto the plate. You know, there seems to be a lot of waste in an industrial kitchen that would produce those meals for the students. And then you showed all these very impressive fields and production facilities, and surely there's also farm and sort of agro production waste as well. And so I'm curious that looking at Zamorano in a holistic fashion, how much growth room is there if you add the kitchen plus the sort of field waste from all those lettuces that the students are ultimately not going to eat, or you can't market or whatever? Okay, that's one question. One more is just, if people don't really want to buy black soldier flies, you know, they don't want to change up their feed game for whatever, in spite of the fantastic data that you showed, how do people feel about BSF fed chickens? Is that not an issue at all? I'm thinking for both. So there's no objection whatsoever to the chicken. It's really just the feed that is maybe an adoption challenge. I just wanted to ask about that. Thank you.
One more. Can I take one more question before I give them a chance to respond?
I think you was.
Go ahead. All right.
No, I don't have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
No, listen.
This can be attached to her question. So you showed a slide that you started off with, I believe, just in your case, 4 tons of substrate, and then broke it down to soldier fly meal and frass, et cetera, et cetera. But that didn't add up to 4 tons. And I was wondering what the rest was, if it was just water loss, or if there was something else that just wasn't shown there. Okay, because it is important what you're left over with when you're talking about millions of tons, right?
Okay, so waste is not in Zamorano is not wasted. So I had to fight to get these 150 kilograms, right? There's a place where they're composting that to sell different types of compost. But this was the this is for me to compete with. Actually, the reason I have to collect it at 6 a.m. is because I don't get it at 6 a.m. The other person is gonna get it at 6:10, right? So, but we've done a lot of different types of waste trials to see if Hermetia can feed on them, if they can, process it. And during the December and January, when the students are gone for the Christmas break, we feed the larvae with pig manure, which is also fine, bacteriologically speaking. It doesn't have anything, no contaminants to feed it later to other animals, but we don't do it just because, people don't like their animals being fed with manure. In order to escalate it, which is one of the questions we're trying to answer now, is how we become financially stable, because right now, for us, it's not cheap to produce the meal. It's actually costing us money. Because the employee there's just one person running the whole thing. And we're thinking about adding different types of waste in order to produce enough meal or enough larvae so as we can pay ourselves the salary of this person. And the direction we're thinking about taking is going with chicken manure. Because chicken manure plus the dining hall waste should be enough if we ourselves have our own chicken, right? In a free range way, and we produce our own eggs and sell our own eggs. If I have to sell the meal or if I have to sell the larvae, then there's the middleman. I will lose money, then I won't be able to do it. And that's one of the things when we start thinking about getting this thing bigger is the size of the operation you can maintain, right? Second question was, the numbers don't add up. When you dry the larvae, there are 60% water. So if you start with 100 kilograms of larvae and you put it in the solar dryer, at the end you have 40 kilograms only of dry meal. That's the quick answer, right?
Yes. Rebecca, your question about people not having issues with their chicken, buying chicken that's fed on insect larvae, BSF larvae. Nobody has an issue with it. Free-range chicken keeping is often regarded a poor man or woman's venture. And these are scavenging birds. They eat anything available out there. Interestingly, they're actually the tastiest birds you can eat. So people scramble for free-range local chicken in the market. Yeah. So there's no issue. There's no issue with them eating that. And there's a question of the BSF. I don't know whether I got it right or wrong. Black soldier fly has a beautiful, if you're interested in chemical ecology, it's one of those insects where chemical ecology is really, really interesting. You'd ask why it's attracted to rotting stuff, just like mosquito is attracted to the air that you breathe. That's why it comes to your head and not your arm. You breathe out CO2 that's attractive to mosquitoes. BSF is very attracted to the emanating smell from rotting things. And the larva, the reason why when you're rearing BSF larva, even in the open, you don't find a lot of house flies. It's a voracious feeder. The larvae produce infochemicals that basically just keep away housefly and some of those insects. So there are a lot of beautiful things that you can still do. There's very nice science opportunities in this space. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Okay, take a bow. Okay, so if you signed up to join our speakers for lunch, we'll be in Warren 130. It'll be a good opportunity to talk with them if you signed up. If you haven't, you can join them for dinner on Friday night. If you're in the class, I'll send an email information about that. That'll be for the Chris Dennis Memorial Symposium, focused on how universities can drive sustainability change. There are 2 Cornell students doing internships with each of these people this summer. So a good reminder to, pursue the speakers and the opportunities that can come with them. So thank you again for joining us. And if you're joining for lunch, we can gather here.
It's having best